Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. Justin Baker, co-host, joining me in studio, and we have a few series to talk about that have ended. It is the official end of the Carolina Hurricanes, the Chicago Blackhawks, the Arizona Coyotes, and the Columbus Blue Jackets 2019-2020 season. And as those close out, we're going to just talk a little bit about the series, but really our main focus is on what those four teams are going to look like moving forward, whether we think they'll take steps forward or backwards or what have you. So, Justin, we'll just jump right in. Let's start with the absolute trumping and thumping by the Colorado Avalanche of the Arizona Coyotes after a few games where it looked like Kemper was going to give Arizona at least, I don't think we thought they were going to win, but like at least extend this series to, maybe 6, maybe even 7 games. And that just did not happen.
I felt bad for Kemps. Oh my gosh.
I felt bad for the junior team that Colorado was playing. It was bad. It was rough.
Oh, yeah, no Kessel, no Hull to be found. I mean, they got their points but it wasn't like what it should have been, not even a point per game, which is what I was kind of expecting for these guys, or something close to it.
I mean, when you're in a 7-1 game, which is what Game 5 was, and you score they made it from 6-0 to 6-1. So like that goal is inconsequential,
right? And
that goal doesn't matter. And any goals when you're that far down, they don't really make any difference. The same kind of goes for the other 7-1 loss that they experienced. By that point, they were already down 4-0. So it doesn't. Oh nope, sorry, 5. Yeah, 4-0. So at those points, those goals, they don't mean too much. It's fair to say that Colorado and Arizona, there was the biggest disparity out of any series, even though it wasn't a sweep, and we did see one sweep. I actually think the disparity between those two teams was much greater than it was between the Chicago Blackhawks and the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, it's funny. I saw like a little meme, and it was just the Arizona bandwagon, right? And it was the picture of that Oklahoma Sooners like wagon where it goes on the field, makes a sharp turn, tips over, and that sums it up, because everybody, and myself, I was a little excited for the Arizona going into this, but the minute I saw them facing Colorado, I'm like, nope, no chance. But I figured, Kemp's, maybe Hall, Kessel will show up, score a few goals, and they'll make it competitive. And maybe
because
games.
Hall did make a series between the Devils and the Lightning.
Right.
He extended that to 6 games. I mean, it was somewhat exciting, but it was just they had no shot.
No, and it looked like those last 2 games where they got thumped 7-1 both times. Like they just stopped playing for Rick Tocchet, and I feel bad. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some, I don't want to say major turnover in some players, but there's going to be some changes. And when you don't have even a GM really solidified, I mean, I know Steve Sullivan's there, but is long term. He's not really the guy right now. So we'll. Is he still on an interim basis? But yeah, I mean,
I think that they have that he is. I'm not sure.
I mean, regardless. There's bound to be some changes, because it was clear how much further ahead Colorado was than Arizona.
I mean, Taylor Hall just killed his ability to go in and get $10 million or something. Like, there's no way anyone's giving him that kind of money.
No, I didn't think so either. But I didn't even think that going in before this series. But
I thought someone would give him 9. But
I mean, if Jeff Skinner can get 9, then
on the flip side, Nazem Kadri might need 9.
I mean,
11 points in 8 games, 6 goals. He was on fire. And before that, he had 10 points in 19 playoff games. 10 points in 19 playoff games and only 3 goals in 19 playoff games. Then he goes and gets 6 in 8 games. Definitely this is his year, I think. Kadri has finally gone to the second round of the playoffs, and I'm sure he's thrilled. Not 0 to mention
penalty minutes too.
Of course, Nathan McKinnon played great as well. What's that?
I said 0 penalty minutes too for Kadri.
Yeah, what the heck? And previous to that, in 19 playoff games, he had 56. Granted, that's because some of those were 10-minuters, but still, nonetheless.
Yeah, and McKinnon, like you said, my gosh, this guy is so good. Like if he didn't score the goal, he was a direct. It was his it was his doing.
Right, he was driving it all. Yeah, he had 13 points in 8 games. It's just unbelievable. We'll see second round. We don't know who they're going to play, but we'll see second round if it's a little more even. I don't think it's they won't play Vegas.
Nope,
for sure. Right now, they would if Vancouver were to continue and win out the series. I think Vancouver would play Vegas, and then Colorado will take on the winner of the Stars and the Flames.
I believe that's
correct. That's how it goes. So between the Stars and the Flames, who do you want to see as Colorado? I got to think that you're hoping the Flames can at least push it to 7 games, which we'll find out tonight. So maybe by the time you're listening to this, you already know the answer to that. But as far as what the Arizona Coyotes do in the offseason, do you think that they bring back Taylor Hall? Do you think that he's going to sign there?
I don't think he'll re-sign there. Not that I don't think there's an opportunity for him. And, maybe, Arizona's a desirable place to live, but maybe a long-term goal.
That's about it.
Yeah, that's
not exactly a desirable hockey place.
Right, and I think if you're Taylor Hall, right, obviously you've made your money, right? He's been banking $6 million since he entered this league, basically. So he's made enough money. I don't think that's really on the forefront of his mind.
He
it's
wants
all about
to win.
Winning.
Yeah, which you're not going to win in Arizona.
No,
you're just aren't. I'm sorry. There are some teams you are never going to win in.
No.
It just is what it is.
And I think, too...
You're never going to win if you go to the Cleveland Browns. That's just is what it is. You won't win.
Yeah, and I personally think, too, not only does he want to go to a place where win, but he wants to go to a place where he can have, a top-line center to play with, somewhere where he's not... Sure. He doesn't have to be the guy. He's got somebody there to help support him.
Yeah. And if Calgary loses the series to Dallas, which they might... I think someone's going to go, and that's going to bring in Taylor Hall to me. That's where he'll go. He'll go to Calgary, but that's another conversation for another day. Arizona, ultimately, they are going to have a lot of cap space. They're going to have, with losing those guys, I guess they'll have some opportunities for somebody to step in there. And either way, it is unfortunate with how it ended, but it's great to see Arizona move on in some way. They had a victory in the playoffs, even if it was just the qualifying round. I think it is a move forward for this team. Now it'll just depend on how can they draft, not in the bottom. It's one thing to hit on all your or most of your top 10 picks. It's another thing once you're picking in the top 15 or the back half of the 15. So that'll be.
They don't have a first round pick. And,
right, they give it away. Yeah, of course.
And if I'm being honest, I think this is an opportunity where, they have to try to make a move where I would like to see them go out and try to snag some sort of top center in this draft.
Well,
move into the top 10 somehow.
I would like my team to do that as well.
Well, of course.
Every team.
But I think more than almost any team in the draft.
Yeah, they desperately
maybe outside of Ottawa or maybe Detroit, they need a top center.
Right? Yeah, and those teams aren't in a position to win now, so you're not going to go out and do anything like that.
Exactly.
Whereas Arizona needs something, which in some ways they got it, but unfortunately, they won their series, but they didn't get any home games out of it. And not a lot of publicity out of what happened in that qualifying round just because of what else is happening in the world. So, but hopefully a good step moving forward. To me, they're still a team that will be, regardless of who they go and sign, assuming that they use their money to bring in some level of talent, they're still the same team. They're still a bubble playoff team to me. Yeah. That's what they'll be next year. Maybe they continue to get great goaltending from Kemper and a couple players develop a little further, but ultimately they will still be a bubble team next year, regardless of what they do.
Yeah, we know they'll still play that defensive sort of game, and they'll win those 2-1 games, and like you said, make it a push for the playoffs every year.
All right, let's go to the Chicago Blackhawks. Didn't win a single game against Vegas Golden Knights.
No, they won.
Well,
one.
Oh, they did win one.
They did win one.
Oh, yeah, they did win one. That's right. I think that was the one I didn't watch.
There you go.
That was why. Yeah, see, that was why. Sorry. So it went 5 games. The Blackhawks looked overmatched for the most part, especially in the games I watched since Vegas won all 4 of them. Patrick Kane, I think he left a little bit to be desired in this series. He played much better in the preliminary round than he did here against Vegas, but overall, I think this is just a like, yay, we made it. Chicago had no business being here. Arizona, I'd say they did. Like they could have made the playoffs in a normal scenario. So I think that them making it to the quote unquote first round is less of a like, whoa, how did you get here? And then it was for Chicago that had no business being there. Kind of same as Montreal, but both Montreal's holding their own against Philly. I should say Carey Price is holding his own.
There you go.
But yeah, what did you think about Chicago? And I guess this is a developmental year, and they happen to make it to the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's clear that a lot of their younger guys were just overmatched in terms of depth, especially up front. It's clear that Vegas can roll, their top two lines all night long, and they're producing, whereas, Chicago really, if their top two lines aren't producing, they're not going to get any support from the bottom, unfortunately.
Yeah, and Mark Stone looked fantastic.
Yeah,
and that's what I was hoping to see from Mark Stone.
Yeah, he looked like the Mark Stone we've all wanted.
8 points in 8 games. A very balanced and defensively very strong. It was just, the one game that Chicago wins, you get it. You actually had a good game from Corey Crawford. Only lets in the one goal, and the rest of them, really that's what it came down to. Ultimately, was the goaltending situation in that.
Yeah, and he wasn't very good. I mean,
he wasn't good against the Oilers, and they still beat the Oilers.
No. Well, that's because he got some scoring up front. But I mean, look, Corey Crawford's a free agent this year. I don't know if Chicago's going to bring him back. If they do, it'll be like on a 1 year,
one and
couple
$2
million
maybe,
deal.
I think he might get the same kind of respect that maybe a Mike Smith got, where he got like 2 years at $3 million.
Sure,
if he wants to go somewhere and he could go somewhere where they need goaltending. I don't know how much Chicago is going to be willing to give up to keep him. I actually could see Chicago going after Robin Lehner and bringing him back.
I'm sure that was discussed before they dealt him. And they said, maybe they went to him and said, hey, listen, we know we're not going to make the playoffs because obviously nobody knew this was going to happen. Right. And they're like, we're going to deal you so we can get an asset because we know we're not getting into the dance. So we're still interested in bringing you back. We still liked what you gave us. Are you interested? And, we'll talk in the summer. And, of course, all this happens. And I still think it's possible. However, they've only got, I think, roughly, Cap Friendly has them with, like, roughly $7 million in cap space. Now, a lot of that changes because, some of these younger guys or some of these older guys might get dealt.
Well, if Seabrook stays on LTIR, like, let's maybe assume that Seabrook is actually going to be done, then that will open up $6.8 million.
Yeah, might open up a couple bucks. And, I mean, they could go out, they could sign a Braden Holtby, they could get a Robin Lehner, and they're probably at a reasonable price.
Yeah, I'd much rather spend money on Lehner than I would on Holtby, for sure.
Hands down.
At 29, he's probably going to command $6 million would be my guess.
At least, yeah. I think 6 to 7
times
is fair.
6 or something like that. Yeah.
I hope he gets long-term.
And because the cap is going to stay flat, I think that could hurt his ultimate prospect. Like, he might go and have to take 5.5 or 5 if he wants the long term.
Well, I think there's going to be a bidding war for probably your Lehner and Markstrom, and then everybody else is going to kind of fall underneath.
Yeah, actually, what could happen is because the cap's going to stay flat. You look at a guy who's 29, and maybe this doesn't apply so much to a 29-year-old. Maybe teams are more willing to give out a full 7 years. But for Holtby, maybe you're willing to give him 7 years if he's willing to take like 4 a year. And that's how these guys are going to get their money, because they're going to go, well, we can't, like, the cap's not going up,
money.
But we'll give you the long-term deal, and we can deal with this later on, put you on LTIR and call it a day. And then you're not paying the guy, for nothing, or like you can kind of bury him in a way later on. So I think you might see that with that happening, but I think Chicago certainly is going to have to figure out their goaltending, and they just need to continue developing these guys. But I guess the question is going to be, you've got Brandon Saad, who's going to come up on a UFA at the end of next season. So he, to me, is definitely a candidate to be dealt. I think you're more than willing to maybe hold $2 or $3 million of that deal and send him on his way. See if you can find a taker who's willing to give you some picks.
Yeah, the concern for me is they've got younger guys developing up front, but on the back end, they don't really have much. So a guy like Saad could maybe.
Well, they do have Adam Boqvist, which that's
yeah.
kind of your. He was what third or fifth overall or something like that.
Yeah, and maybe he develops into a nice piece, and I'm
eighth overall.
Yeah, I'm still thinking he has that potential, but. I want to see more younger guys that they can bring up on the back end because, again, you need to complement these forwards up front, and they need to go out and find something in goal because Malcolm Subban's not a long-term answer. I can tell you that right now. So,
wait, he's not even a short-term answer. Yeah, but I mean, they've got so many guys who are coming up. I mean, you are going to have to pay Kajula and Kubelik and Dylan Strome. They're all going to take. Not massive deals by any means, but they're all going to need money. They're all going to get more than their ELC that they're on right now. So,
no doubt,
that is going to be interesting. So, I mean, that's just where Chicago is going to have to kind of maneuver this with their 4 defensemen that are all making about $4 million plus. And then, of course, there are 2 superstars making 10.5. It is nice to get that Corey Crawford goaltending off the books. If you can't find a really great goaltending, maybe you just try to do it by committee and pull in a couple $2 to $3 million guys, and maybe Corey Crawford is one of those guys.
Bringing a Mike Smith,
willing to come in for cheap. Yeah, but yeah, only $7 million in cap space, so that'll be interesting to see how they re-sign everybody. But Chicago, to me, I think they're on the up and up, based on the progression of some of these younger guys. And I like Kirby Doc's only going to get better. Kubelik and maybe Alexander Nylander, there's a little glimmer of hope for him, and Dylan Strome's looking better. So I think things will pan out well for them. Maybe they won't probably win 3 cups in 5 years, or 6, 7 years, whatever it was, but they'll be back. You want to do Carolina or Columbus next?
Let's save Carolina for last.
Okay. All right. So the Columbus Blue Jackets, they participate in the 4th longest game in the history of the league in Game 1. That game was madness. The weirdest part about that game was the fact that it was, I can't remember, what time did it end? It ended at 9 something.
Yeah.
I think it was.
Because they had to move the Carolina game to the morning.
Right. And that game had started at 3. And it was just wait, it was like you're watching this game, and usually these long overtime games, you're used to it being 2 a.m.
Right.
For some reason, all the long overtime games always were West Coast games, it felt like. And no matter what, even if the game started at 7:30, 8 o'clock, you're still into the 1 a.m. hour on some of those long games, like that Philly-Pittsburgh one where Keith Primo wins the game. Those games, that's my memory of long overtime games, is it's definitely past midnight and you're still watching. Whereas this was it's only 9 o'clock, but we're going into the 5th overtime. And it was entertaining and a lot of fun. Just as a side note, if the league ever decides, 2 overtimes is enough and we'll go to a shootout, I will protest on the street of hockey, whatever, wherever that is. I'm gonna be pissed. They better not do anything like that, because this rarely happens, and it was unbelievable.
It's fun to watch. From a goaltending perspective.
I just keep come on, keep going. I want this game to go 7 OTs.
I don't know if I ever want.
I want it to break the record. I want to be able to see the longest game ever. I mean, nobody was mad about when Wimbledon went and had to go to another day to play. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
2010 or something. That was amazing. And everyone was talking about it. It's just a way to get people talking about your sport. It's not a bad thing. It's not like people are, I can't believe they're allowing people to play that long.
No, and, especially in today's day and age, I think players are taking better care of themselves health-wise, so I don't think there's that risk of a guy's going to injure himself because he's just playing too hard. And
from a broadcasting standpoint, I get it. That game had to get moved to the next day, but it didn't really matter. And this is the only time you're ever going to actually have to move a game. Most of the time, you're just going to be able to play, and you're going to say, hey, it's over on our alternate channel or something, or we'll go watch it on NHL Network. So that's all I have to say about that. But the Tampa Bay Lightning ultimately beat them in 5 games. It felt closer than that. All the games were very tight. But Tampa Bay ultimately taking this one, and kind of went the way that I was hoping it would go. I wanted Columbus to be gone because Tampa is fun to watch.
They are.
They're very fun to watch,
especially when you don't have Pittsburgh or Edmonton. Those fun players in there. You want more of these guys.
I wanted to see them move on, and I was happy that they got past their snake bite from Columbus. Speaking of Columbus, though, where do you see them going from here? Because this really is like 3 of the last 4 years they've lost in the first round. They've only won one series in their team history outside. I guess if you consider the Leafs, they did beat the Leafs, so I guess they've won 2 technical series in the history of their organization. This year was supposed to kind of be a backwards year, anyways, but they did okay without really any superstars up front because of really great coaching. They have
phenomenal goaltending,
$5 million in cap space, and where do they go from here?
Well, thank their lucky stars that they've got both these goaltenders signed for 2 more seasons at really cheap numbers. I mean,
really cheap.
Korpisalo 2.8 and Merzlikins at $4 million, right? Korpisalo, my God, this man, insane. Columbus probably should have been swept if it
he made all the saves.
He did. He did everything you could ever hope for out of a goaltender.
I actually wonder if they had lost that game earlier, if he wasn't better later in the series. Because remember, they played a couple of long games with the Leafs too in overtime.
Right.
And I wonder if he hadn't played that insane game, if he would have been more rested.
I mean, I don't know if you get any better than a .941 save percentage. So
well, but a lot of that was because of that. That game definitely
2 goals,
helped.
Through 88 shots. But I mean, look, we know Pierre-Luc Dubois is a superstar up front. We know what they got in Seth Jones.
That was his coming out party.
Yeah,
man.
he was
this
great.
Playoffs. He was
minus
fantastic.
that cross-checking on the boards against Braden Point in that last game. But Seth Jones, he was sort of in and out a lot of times in the series, but we know what he is. He's a fantastic defenseman. So, you know what? Everybody's allowed to slip up, in a series and maybe not play their best. But the problem is when your superstars maybe slack off a little bit or maybe just don't have it, for a few games, you need other guys to pick up. And so, up front especially, Pierre-Luc Dubois was doing everything for him. But they weren't getting much else from everybody, from anybody else.
Yeah. Offensively,
and that's the problem. Offensively. And that's the problem. I know Barry or, John Tortorella, that's the way he likes to play those tight games, but you can't expect your goaltender to make 40 saves every game. No. Although I will say, though, those last couple games, it semed like for a majority of the time Columbus getting all the
actually
shots.
Drove the play. Yeah, they did really well. They wore the Tampa Bay Lightning down a little bit. It's just Tampa was able to score.
Yeah,
you could see it when Braden Point scored in overtime in Game 5.
Just
that it was
relief.
like, thank you, God. We don't have to play these bastards anymore.
I know. But Tampa, though, they did have one thing they didn't have last year, and they had a line that could grind with Columbus. And Yanni Gourde, Barclay, those guys could go out and grind. And so that ultimately what I think has made the difference, and with no Steven Stamkos, too.
And, it doesn't help Columbus that, they're without Brandon Dubinsky. They're without Josh Anderson. Those are 2 big losses up front.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure. But side note, Alexander Texier, he looked really good throughout the play. Like, he looked like a guy who could maybe make a difference down the road and be a decent top 9 forward for Columbus, which you're always looking for those guys. Also, Riley Nash, he's kind of come back. Like, he looked all right. Whereas he was in the minors.
Oh, yeah.
And they sent him down, and here he is up playing a pretty decent role as the third-line center for this team, and he looked pretty good doing it. So he got that decent deal after playing for the Bruins and stuff and looking good, and he was garbage, and he's back. So that's always good because he's got another $2.75 million on a deal. It's just going to we're going to find out, what is Columbus going to do, because they have to re-sign Pierre-Luc Dubois. Like, Pierre-Luc Dubois isn't getting less than Nylander. He's not getting less
he'll
than...
get 8, I think, is what I'd peg him in.
He'll
get Ryan Johansson money.
It's going to be hard not to... regular season-wise, not great. 10 points in 10 playoff games, though. Kind of had his coming-out party, and the fact that his points, the system he plays in, doesn't exactly say... go out there and get your points.
Right. But I think
he's a really good defensive center. Like, there's a lot that goes into it. I feel like if Columbus if Columbus is smart, then I mean he's probably getting 7 years at maybe even 9.
No, see what I think he's probably going to end up doing, knowing
take the short
that they're in. Yeah, he'll take the short, knowing they're in a flat cap, and say, okay, I'll take 3-4 years at $7-8 million, or maybe even 9 because he's taking a shorter term, and he's going to try to cash in because
but then the Blue Jacket, what's the advantage for them? Then he's a UFA at the end of the deal.
Well, I think he'll run it into the last years of his into his RFA year, so that he's maybe he's on his last year. But
sure, they're going to want to try and get him.
They're going to try, to get him, but. I mean, honestly, if Alexander Wenberg had played up to where I thought he could be last year, or where he should have been, maybe that's a different discussion, because now Columbus has this leverage to say, oh, well, we've got another guy who can play center for us.
Which Wenberg did look a little better in the playoffs.
He looked better.
5 points in 10 games as opposed to 22 and 57. So
right. Looked better, but again, if he had been out there, if Wenberg looked like, scored 8 points in 10 games or something like that, then Columbus could be like, okay, well, we could probably use him more, so we don't need you as badly. But
they need him.
They need him badly.
Even if Wenberg's good, you need to have 2 good centers. So, I mean, he's going to get his money, and it'll be interesting to see that deal, because right now, with Columbus has $5.2 million in cap space, they've got quite a bit of money in their defense. And they also have to be thinking, like, all right, we've got Ryan Murray and David Savard, who are UFAs. And then in that 3 years from now, you've got Seth Jones and Zach Werenski.
They're not keeping both of them.
No, I
don't think so.
There's no way. So it'll be interesting to see how they go about trying to structure this. Now, you do have, like, Foligno's a UFA in a couple years, but...
And both their goaltenders in 2 years. They've got to re-sign there.
People aren't too worried. You're not worried about 3 years from now. I get you are, but you're at the same time you're not. Like, right. You're just trying to do what you can do next year. But Pierre-Luc Dubois, probably the biggest thing on the docket for Columbus. Other guys that are RFAs, you can easily take care of those guys. And Josh Anderson actually is an RFA too. So I wonder if they just let him go. But.
It's possible, but I think if you're Columbus, though, you're hoping that the younger guys develop and the guys you have signed can get a little bit better next year, so that way, you can try to make a splash without having to dip into free agency.
Right. Okay, let's go to the Carolina Hurricanes. Maybe Justin Williams' swan song here that didn't last very long. The Bruins went from looking pretty rough in the exhibition games to, for the most part, just rolling over the Carolina Hurricanes. They did not have much of an answer, especially goaltending wise. What were your thoughts on that series?
I was impressed with Boston's second line, and I said it coming into the series. I said the difference would be, can Carolina's depth carry them? Because I wasn't so confident in Krejci's line's ability. Right. I thought Coyle would chip in every once in a while, which he did, and he looked good playing.
Yeah, he had a couple goals.
Yeah. But my bigger concern was Krejci's line, who they pair with them and how they perform. And boy, they look like the most consistent line throughout this series. And with good reason, because that's how they were able to finish off Carolina in 5, because you look past, obviously losing Svechnikov was a huge hurt for Carolina. But when you look past Aho, they weren't getting a lot of support offensive-wise.
Right.
A lot of depth guys weren't playing. And when you've got 2 lines, potentially, maybe 2.5 if you count Coyle, that are rolling in Boston, and they're getting good goaltending from Halak. I mean, there's really no chance for Carolina.
Yeah, it was pretty weird that Rask just left in the middle of a series.
I'm not gonna hate on him for it. I know there's Mike Milbury's out there bashing him for doing that, but I will never get mad at a guy, especially in this era with COVID. If he wants to say, no, I just want to go home, I want to be with my family, I don't want to deal with this shit, that's fine, whatever. I may not agree with you. I may have said, hey, stick it out, but that's your choice. Cool, whatever. And it's not...
It just seemed weird because it came after him saying, like, I don't like the vibe here. There's no fans. It's annoying. And then, like, Rod Brindamore talks crap back to him and was like, well, I find that guys say that after they lose. And, they went back and forth. And then he just said, no, I'm going home. I want to be with my family. I wonder. I mean, in fairness, it sounded, the way that it was all worded, it really sounded like he, not to put, like, emotions based on his words, but it sounded like a little bit of depression was kind of setting in, which I started wondering, like, okay, we're only a couple weeks into this. What happens when we're 4 weeks into this? like towards the end of the second round, and these guys haven't seen their kids and their wives and their girlfriends or their friend like outside of their team for 4 weeks. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And as it gets a little further, I know that once you get to the conference finals, some family can come in and all that. But I do think that this is going to be as much of a mental game as it is just going out and playing the games.
Oh, no doubt.
You got to keep yourself sharp. And, I was wondering, okay, back to the Leafs series. Mitch Marner, a couple times, he looked like trash. And I always, you always hear, Marner and some of these guys, they all play Fortnite together. And it has been proven many times that video games can really screw up some hand-eye coordination, and like it can throw off your timing. And I was like, I wonder if these guys are playing way more than they usually do, and then they're going from playing these games, going to the hockey game,
right?
And then their timing's off a little bit because of these games. I don't know, but what else are you supposed to do in there?
Yeah, I mean, so let me ask you this question though too: would we be making such a big deal of Tuukka Rask if it was a guy like Chris Wagner from Boston that was like, no, I'm going home? Like, no, like, okay, whatever. See ya.
No,
Bye.
because the Bruins don't rely on Chris Wagner the way that they do with Tuukka Rask, which yes, from a like just an individual personal have nothing to do with the game. Yeah, it's fine, of course, but it does seem strange. Like, screw it, I'm out.
It is strange.
Fortunately, they have Halak, and maybe that factored into his decision. He's like, you guys will be fine.
Yeah, maybe.
He's like almost as good as me.
So
does he get his name on the cup? I'd say lick my balls. You definitely do not get your name on the cup.
I mean, they'll put his name on the cup if they win. I mean, technically, I don't know what the rules are. I know, like, specifically to get on the cup, you have to have played one game in the Stanley Cup Finals or the team competition.
Or a certain amount of playoff. It's a certain amount of playoff games or the certain amount of regular season games. I think you can also get in there.
Okay, maybe. Too. But, yeah, so maybe that plays into it. But, I mean, he'd get his name on the cup.
I would petition not to have him be on the cup.
We know you would. Back to Carolina, though. So, the more important topic here. I mean, long-term, or even short-term for that matter, I don't know if I'm necessarily worried for this team, but my biggest question is in goal because I looked at the numbers. James Reimer, Peter Mrazek, they all looked fine. The numbers were good. They weren't great at some points. There was, obviously that Bergeron goal wraparound to end the series was kind of a softie. I'm sure Mrazek would want back, but at the same time, when the numbers look fine, I'm already hearing rumors of like, oh man, we're going to go out and we're going to poach a Robin Lehner, or we're going to go after a big name goaltender.
Go ahead.
Like,
it's not going to hurt you.
Right. I mean, but at the same time, I'm like, why?
Would it have made that big of a difference in that series?
Would it have? Is that really the bigger concern? And to me, bigger concern is up front, I think. What happens when a guy like, Svechnikov or Aho or Teravainen goes down, are these guys going to pick up the slack? And, didn't really look like they were doing much of it. Right.
Yeah, it was basically Aho, Svechnikov, and the rest of them, right. Even all through the playoffs, really not doing a whole lot.
It
wasn't, goaltending definitely was not the problem. I really, truly believe that they were just totally overmatched.
Yeah, the experience showed.
Yeah, and the Bruins just know how to win in the playoffs. Carolina, you just looked like the Bruins were just toying with them sometimes. Like they just knew what to do. They really did. And outside of Aho looked fantastic. He always had, but even so, he didn't take over like he did in the first round. But I should say the preliminary round. But overall, they just need to continue developing and acquiring depth. Like beyond those guys, you're right. They don't have a whole lot. They tried the Ryan Dzingel, and now they have Vince Trocheck, and Trocheck didn't really. He wasn't anything special at all in that series. I don't know if after he hurt his knee a couple years ago, and came back, I'm wondering if the reason that the Panthers were so willing to ditch him is because they knew they could see something had changed in him, and that's why they dealt him. But it doesn't hurt. Like Ryan Dzingel, no points in the playoffs. I mean, that's a problem. You brought him in to be your third line center, and he's not putting up any points. Vince Trocheck, 2 assists. He had 1 goal in 15 games for the Hurricanes, and really only had this entire year in 70 games. He had 11 goals. So somewhere, I mean, in the last 2 years, he's in 125 games, he's got 20 goals after a 31-goal season. So something's going on with Vince Trocheck. He's got to find figure out what's going on there. My guess is that it has something to do with his knee, but ultimately that's a big problem. You need him to be scoring because you don't have really much of a second line, and that's been the issue for them. Defensively, they're great. They just need to take one of those defensive players and make a move, in my opinion. I mean, you're going to lose Vatanen, you're going to lose Edmondson, you're going to lose Van Riemsdyk, so you got to kind of figure out where you go from here, or at least you're going to lose all of them but one.
Yeah, I could.
You
see
might be
Van
able to keep
Riemsdyk
one of them.
Staying on the cheap for maybe a couple $1 million, but like you said,
He might go to Philly or something.
Yeah,
play with his bro.
Right. Well, I mean, they've got Hayden Fleury, they've got Jake Bean, they've got these young guys.
But they're gonna have to pay Hayden Fleury, who looked actually pretty good in that first round.
Yeah, and I mean, the question is, at this point, are you interested in moving a Brady Shea or maybe a Jake Bean at this point?
I mean, you have to move somebody. I really think you need to take the strength that you have on your back end and move it forward. And frankly, it's funny because we've been talking about this for like 4 years, but they've never really done it. They haven't really taken any of those defensive prospects, moved them forward, or moved them for a forward, and the Toronto Maple Leafs are the team to do that with. There's some pretty darn good players in the forward position there that could thrive in a top 6 position in Carolina.
Maybe like a Kasperi Kapanen.
Either a Kapanen or Andreas Janssen.
Yeah.
I mean, depending on who you're willing to move, there's Nylander. Like, he seems to, I guess, at least be the guy that's like, well, he's the one that if you were going to trade any of those, the 4, he'd be the guy that you might move.
Okay, well, say Carolina's interested in Nylander. What would it take to go back to Toronto to make you just that's it?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think they're getting rid of him. No. Slavin or Hamilton aren't leaving.
Maybe not, but I mean, Hamilton only is a UFA after next year.
Sure.
So you have to he's my guess, just based on everything we know about Dougie Hamilton and what he's done in the league thus far. Do you really think he's going to stay in Carolina? He's going to chase the money, he's going to chase going and being on a winning team.
Yeah, I mean, I could see him moving on, but I don't think initially, Carolina's going to want to move him. I think maybe they'll try to wait early on in the season and see what some of the younger guys are doing, and if they're like, oh man, we could live without him, then let's move on. Let's bring in a winger. Let's go see if we can't fetch that Nylander for Hamilton and throw in some picks.
Nylander for a Hamilton, if Hamilton's willing to sign a long-term deal at a decent number.
Yeah, and that's the other question too. If a team can't sign him, are they willing to give a big piece?
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to trade Slavin unless you've got someone else locked up. That's the other thing. And Slavin is just so good. So and he signed a nothing deal, another 5-3 for another 5 years. So that's basically that's like a Nashville Predators deal.
It really is a Yossi. They had him for $4 million for so long.
Silly. Anything else with the Carolina Hurricanes that you want to hit on? You had tweeted about Justin Williams a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger question is he coming back? Is he going? And my opinion is no. I think he's done. He's not coming back because I think, especially last year, you waited this long because you weren't willing to give up the body for this kind of push for the playoffs. And are you willing to do it again next year, knowing? Again, the short season
of whatever it's going to look like,
and all this stuff going on right now in the world. I just don't see it. I don't think the drive's there anymore to really compete.
Yeah, I mean, he had a goal in the 7 games that he played in.
He can still play in the league. There's no doubt about it in my mind. But does he want to do it? I don't really think so.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're Carolina, if you're willing to go, sure, yeah, come back in January next year.
Yeah.
Well, I guess January next year is going to be the equivalent of March. I think if I'm Carolina, I tell them hey, we either need you here for the whole year, or and we're happy to let you sit out every other game.
Right. Not practice.
To me, that's what. If you're a veteran, a real an old guy in baseball, they'll sit you out. You only play 2/3 of the games.
Right.
If it's funny that hockey doesn't really have that culture of we're just benching him just because we want him to rest. Like, we're a good team. We don't need them for every game. And we know that this particular game is kind of a, like, we can get some young guy in there instead of him.
Bring in Morgan Geekie up and just rotate with him, you know?
Yeah, it seems like that could be an option. Unfortunately, it's not. Like, hockey is like, you're healthy, you're going in. Unless it's last game of the season and we're in first place or we're not going to move anywhere. Okay, we'll rest a few guys, but you're not really doing that until the very end of a year. But if you just like a goalie, like if you just rotated guys in on a more regular basis, you might see greater success from an older player. Be interesting to see how that could play out. All right, well, I think that's it. That's all the teams that have lost. We'll the rest of the series that end, which they're all going to end
in a couple days
at some point.
Yeah.
Our next show we'll break down the 4 teams that lose. I think you said so far you are 2-2.
No, you are 2-2.
Oh, I'm 2-2.
I'm 3-1, sir.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay. Sorry.
Although I did pick the correct amount of games for Carolina, Boston just picked the wrong team.
Just the wrong team. Yeah. So I'm 2-2. He's 3-1. Vancouver and St. Louis. That's my. I gotta snag Vancouver to catch back up to you. I think that
you got Dallas too, where I got Calgary.
Okay, there you go. Well, and Dallas is. We'll find out tonight. We'll find out tonight who takes the first round, because some of these are about to be over. I believe we both said the Islanders, though.
We both have the Islanders and Philly,
which that was a pretty good call. I am rooting for Game 7 for the Flyers and the Canadiens. That to me has actually been the most fun series. I have loved watching that series.
Yeah, Backstrom's back tonight too, so that'll make an even bigger difference.
Yeah, for the Capital. Yeah, okay. All right, well, that's our show. You can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Let us know what you thought, and we'll just continue watching playoff hockey. So glad that there's been no outbreaks inside of the bubble, and we'll talk to you guys soon.